The British government has announced it will prioritise access for high-skilled workers from around the world in its post-Brexit point-based immigration system, setting out its plans to put an end to a reliance on cheap labour from Europe. According to the Home Secretary, the new system will assign points for specific skills, qualifications, salaries or professions, and only give visas to those who have enough points. It will come into force from January the 1st, 2021, and will treat EU and non-EU citizens the same. Here's Simon Pusey with more international news in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel's studio in London for your 5-minute news update from around the world. Hundreds of passengers who have tested negative for the new coronavirus have been leaving a quarantined cruise ship in Japan amid heavy criticism over the country's handling of the outbreak. About 500 passengers on the Diamond Princess cruise ship disembarked in Japan's Yokohama port amid the increasing infections. They left after a 2-week quarantine period. It comes as criticism of the way authorities handled the situation increases. US officials said moves to contain the virus may not have been sufficient, and one Japanese health expert who visited the Diamond Princess at the port of Yokohama said the situation on board was completely chaotic.
Turned out that the cruise ship was completely inadequate in terms of the infection control. There was no distinction between the green zone, which is free of infection, and the red zone, which is potentially contaminated by virus. There was no single professional infection control person inside the ship, and there was nobody in charge of infection prevention. As a professional, the bureaucrats were in charge of everything.
Boeing's crisis-hit 737 MAX jetliner faces a new potential safety issue as debris has been found in fuel tanks of several new planes which were in storage awaiting delivery to airlines. The head of Boeing's 737 program has told employees that the discovery was absolutely unacceptable. A Boeing spokesman said the company did not see the issue further delaying the jet's return to service. It comes as the 737 MAX remains grounded after 2 fatal crashes. Libya's UN-backed government has withdrawn from peace talks after the capital was hit by rocket fire. It said the port was one of the targets struck by forces loyal to renegade General Khalifa Haftar, prompting the evacuation of fuel tankers. The city has been under siege for almost a year and relies heavily on shipping to feed its population. Top negotiators to broker a lasting ceasefire between the two sides in the civil war have faltered several times. Farmers in Kenya have been speaking of how locusts have almost totally destroyed their crops. The swarms of locusts, first sighted in December, have already destroyed tens of thousands of hectares of farmland in Kenya, Somalia and Ethiopia, threatening food supplies in the worst locust invasion in 70 years. Before the invasion, some 11 million people in Ethiopia, Somalia and Kenya were already experiencing food insecurity, and the swarms have worsened the situation. Local residents in the slums of India's Ahmedabad have been outraged after a wall was erected along their shanties ahead of US President Donald Trump's visit. Social activists and residents have accused the Indian government of hiding the poor along Trump's motorcade route, causing some to start a hunger strike. A senior government official said the 400-metre-long wall was being built for security reasons, not to conceal the slum district, but added it was part of a beautification and cleanliness drive. An inquest has heard how the British television presenter Caroline Flack was found hanged in her London flat on Saturday, and paramedics were unable to revive her. The suicide of the 40-year-old former presenter of the hugely popular Love Island dating show has reignited a debate in Britain about the conduct of the tabloid press and the behaviour of people on social media. Coroner's officer Sandra Paulson told the court that police had been flagged down on the street by an unidentified person who had led them to a residential address.
Nice to see you again.
How are you? Nice to see you again.
Britain's Prince Andrew is celebrating his 60th birthday 3 months after he stepped down from public duties over his connections to sex scandals involving late US financier Jeffrey Epstein. Andrew gave up royal duties for the foreseeable future last November, following a disastrous TV interview about his friendship with the convicted sex offender. The Duke met Epstein in 1999. It's thought he will celebrate with the Duchess of York, their daughters, Princess Beatrice and Eugenie, and friends at his Royal Lodge home in Windsor Great Park. And finally, a patient at a British hospital played Mahler and Gershwin on the violin while a tumour was being removed from her brain so that surgeons could preserve her ability to play music. 53-year-old Dagmar Turner, a former management consultant from the Isle of Wight, played her violin during an operation to remove a tumour from the right lobe of her brain, close to the area that controls the fine movement of her left hand. To prevent any damage to her violin skills, doctors mapped her brain, opened the skull and got her to play as they removed the tumour.
Amazing. Carry on, darling.
Turner played music by Gustav Mahler, George Gershwin's jazz classic Summertime, and pieces by Spanish songwriter and singer Julio Iglesias. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the studios in Nigeria.
Many thanks indeed, Simon. Ingenious indeed, playing the violin in that process. Let's move over to sports news with Olumide Macaulay.
Thank you, Gimba. Hello and welcome to Sports News. The Delta State government have announced the second edition of the School Sports Festival, which will hold from March the 8th to the 12th. The State Commissioner for Basic and Secondary Education, Patrick Uka, who unveiled the logo and mascot for the Sports Festival in Asaba, said 11 more sports have been introduced to the event. He also confirmed that the festival is for all primary and secondary schools in Delta State.
Because we have a dream. And the dream is like, for me, I played hockey for Nigeria and I played hockey for Bendel State. I started by going to government college yearly to spend 30 days with other children from other schools. That is how we made a lot of friends. We want to return back to that. So as we're picking those talents, we're not going to allow them go. But by the time we put them together, then the Sports Council will have a pool to pick from.
The Nigeria Football Federation have denied reports that former Super Eagles forward and coach Daniel Amokachi has been appointed as head of its technical department. The NFF insisted that Bitrus Barang is still its technical director and that at no time has it called for applications from candidates for the position. The Football Federation said the clarification became necessary against the background of misleading reports of the appointment of Amokachi. Staying with football, champions Enyimba have moved into the 5th position on the table after beating Kwara United 2-0 in a rescheduled game of the Nigeria Professional Football League at the Enyimba Stadium in Aba, Abia State. Goals from Stanley Dingwa, his 6th of the season, and Victor Mbama, his 9th of the campaign, ensured that the People's Elephants stretched their winning streak to 5 so far. Rangers International needed a 75th minute goal from Chinonso Ezekwe to edge past Kanu Pillars in Enugu and crawled out of the relegation pit. And to the Champions League, Dutch right back Hans Hateboer scored twice as Italian side Atalanta saw off Valencia in the first leg of their round of 16 encounter in Milan. Germany international Timo Werner scored from the penalty spot as RB Leipzig earned a first leg advantage against Tottenham Hotspur. The second leg comes up on March the 10th. And in the English Premier League, Kevin De Bruyne made one goal and scored another as Manchester City easily saw off West Ham in their first game since being banned from European competition for 2 years by UEFA. The champions are now 4 points clear of third-placed Leicester City, but even this win leaves them a distant second to leaders Liverpool, who are 22 points clear with 12 games remaining. And that's it on Sports News. Back to Gimba for the conclusion of the news at 10.
Brilliant. And the main news again. The Christian community in Yobe State today held a peaceful procession to call government's attention to the security situation across the country and Leah's continuous stay in the custody of Boko Haram insurgents 2 years after her kidnap. And Britain today moved to end what it called cheap labour from Europe after it announced priority access for high-skilled workers from around the world, which is a major fallout of Brexit. And that's how it's been on the news at 10 tonight. I want to thank you so much indeed for watching. On behalf of all of us here, have a splendid night. I'm Gimba Umar. Good night.